The clock hit 6 p.m. Daniel did not move. He stared at the dual monitors, the harsh blue light washing out the room and reflecting off the glass in front of him. Another inbox chime broke the silence. A request for a logo revision. He clicked the file, dragged the anchor points, adjusted the kerning by a fraction of a millimeter, and hit save. It was the same process he had repeated for 20 years. His hands hovered over the keyboard for a moment, then he pushed the laptop lid down. The screen went black. In the sudden darkness, his own face stared back from the glass. The lines around his eyes were deeper than he remembered. He sat in the quiet office, the hum of the cooling fan slowly dying down. Outside the window, the city lights flickered to life, but inside the air felt stagnant. He pushed his chair back, the plastic wheels scraping against the floorboards. He stood up, but the weight of the day did not lift. It lingered in his shoulders, a heavy, familiar fatigue that had become his only constant companion. He looked at the empty desk, then turned toward the door, leaving the silent room behind. He sat back down at his desk to clear space on the hard drive. Folders scrolled past in a blur of dates and project codes. He stopped at a directory buried deep. Ideas 2012. He clicked. Files appeared, assets, drafts, exported sequences. He opened the final render. The screen flooded with motion. A character sprinted across a landscape, the physics sharp, the timing precise, the colors vibrant. Daniel watched the playback loop. He moved his mouse to pause it, then played it again. The fluid movement stood in stark contrast to the rigid, static logo revisions he had produced all afternoon. He looked at the file creation date. 12 years of accumulated digital clutter had separated him from this work. He reached for the desk edge, his fingers tracing the wood grain. The realization arrived not as a sudden thought, but as a physical sensation in his chest. He had spent 2 decades polishing the brands of others while the mechanism of his own creativity had ground to a halt. He pushed his chair back. The wheels squeaked against the hardwood floor, a sharp sound in the empty room. He stared at the screen, then at his idle hands, recognizing that the flicker of his own ambition had almost vanished entirely. The next morning, the routine shattered. Daniel ignored his inbox. He cleared the clutter from his dining table and gathered a stack of hardcover books. He aligned them, checked the height, and set his camera on top. The frame was tight, focused on the empty space where he would stand. He adjusted the aperture, checked the focus, and pressed record. For 5 minutes, he spoke. He broke down the design principles he had buried for years. He explained the math behind the motion, the logic of the layout, and the weight of negative space. He stopped, reviewed the clip, and did not edit. He moved to his computer and dragged the file into the browser. He hit publish. The upload bar appeared, a thin blue line crawling across the screen. It moved with agonizing slowness. He watched the progress, his fingers drumming against the desk edge. The bar reached the end. The video was live. He refreshed the page. The counter flickered. 37 views. He stared at the number, the cursor blinking in the search bar. The room was silent. He closed the browser tab, stood up, and walked to the kitchen to pour a glass of water, his hands steady. The rhythm of the work became his new weekend. Friday evenings no longer meant relaxation. Instead, Daniel cleared the dining table, set the camera back on its stack of books, and spent hours in the glow of the monitor. He trimmed frames, synced audio, and layered transitions. Friends called, asking why he spent his Saturdays editing instead of resting. He offered no explanation. He simply adjusted the lighting for the next take, shifting the desk lamp until the shadows fell exactly where he needed them. 6 months of this passed in a blur of late nights and glowing timelines. Then, one Tuesday, a notification pinged. He opened the comments section. A viewer had written, "This changed how I approach my work." Daniel read the sentence once, then a second time. He leaned back, his eyes tracing the letters against the digital background. He did not call his friends. He did not smile or lean back in triumph. He simply closed the comment tab, opened his editing software, and imported the raw files for the next project. His hands moved across the keyboard with a renewed, steady speed. The deadline was self-imposed, and the work was waiting. The notification arrived on a Tuesday morning, an email from a major design firm offering a recurring sponsorship for his channel. Daniel opened it, read the terms, and minimized the window. He opened his spreadsheet. He pulled up his monthly corporate salary figures in one tab and his channel revenue reports in another. He entered the new sponsorship value into the projection. The numbers aligned. The channel revenue now surpassed his corporate paycheck by a precise margin. The gap was small, but it was permanent. He did not lean back or celebrate. He stood up, walked to the printer, and selected the document titled Resignation. The machine hummed, pulling a sheet of white paper through the rollers. The text was stark, formal, and final. He watched the ink settle on the page. He picked up the paper, checked the alignment of his signature, and placed it inside a folder. He returned to his desk, cleared the remaining corporate design files from his desktop, and shut down the dual monitors. The screen went black. He stood in the dim light of the studio, the folder held firmly in his hand, listening to the silence of the office before the shift. Daniel walked down the carpeted hallway. He kept his pace steady, neither rushing nor lingering. The office lights hummed with the same frequency they had for years. But the air felt different. He reached the door. It was open. His boss sat behind the desk, head tilted toward a glowing screen. Daniel stopped at the threshold, waited for the rhythmic tapping of keys to cease. When the room went quiet, he stepped forward. He placed the folder on the mahogany surface, sliding it until it touched the edge of the keyboard. The boss looked up, scanned the cover, and then met Daniel's eyes. Neither man spoke. The resignation letter remained on the desk, a white rectangle against the dark wood. Daniel did not offer an explanation or a justification. He stood his ground while the boss read the lines. The clock on the wall ticking toward the hour. Finally, the boss nodded, reached out, and closed the folder. He rose, extended a hand, and Daniel took it. The grip was firm, brief, and absolute. Daniel turned, walked out of the office, and did not look back at the desk or the monitors. He stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and watched the doors slide shut, sealing the past away. The new studio was a single room with exposed brick and a view of the city. Daniel set up 3 desks in a row. He spent the first week interviewing candidates. He hired a lead editor who knew how to cut for retention and a strategist who understood audience growth. The dynamic changed immediately. Where there had been silence, there was now the sound of debate over hooks and pacing. Daniel moved his own chair to the head of the central table. He stopped opening the design software for every project. Instead, he opened whiteboards and spreadsheets. He reviewed rough cuts, pointed to specific frames that needed tightening, and mapped out the release calendar for the next quarter. His mornings were no longer spent at a keyboard, but in strategy calls, discussing brand partnerships and platform expansion. The team grew. Monitors appeared on every wall, tracking analytics in real time. He watched his employees work, then turned back to his own notebook to map the next phase of the company. The transition from a solo creator to a business owner was complete. He stood at the center of the room, listening to the rhythmic hum of the servers and the focused voices of his team. The event hall roared with voices. Daniel stood near the back, watching the crowd of creators navigate the floor. A young man approached him, holding a notebook, eyes wide with the pressure of expectation. He stopped in front of Daniel, cleared his throat, and asked, "How did you know it would work?" Daniel did not smile. He did not look at the stage lights or the banners. He looked at the young man, then swept his gaze across the room of his own team, working in sync. "I did not," Daniel said. The noise of the crowd seemed to drop away. "I just finished the first video, then the second, then the 100th. He saw the young man pause, the question hanging in the air, unmet by the expected secret. Daniel turned, walked back to the small desk he had set up in the corner, and pulled out his notebook. He tapped his pen against the paper. He did not wait for a reaction. He wrote down one new idea, a single line of ink on the page. The event continued around him, but he was already focused on the next frame, the next cut, and the next cycle of effort. The city lights stretched out like a grid of circuits, pulsing in the dark. Daniel stood on the balcony, the glass door sliding shut behind him to dampen the hum of the world. At 60, the frantic pace of the studio had settled into a steady, rhythmic pulse. He did not look at the bank statements or the quarterly reports that once dominated his desk. He looked down at his hands. He spread his fingers, watching the knuckles and the faint lines etched into his palms. These were not the hands of a man who had merely managed others. They were the tools that had traced every frame, typed every line of code, and built a world from nothing. He flexed his grip, feeling the strength in his tendons, the same strength that had held the pen 20 years ago. There was no vanity in the gesture, only a recognition of service. He had built his own reality, one frame at a time, moving from the flicker of a single abandoned file to a structure that now stood on its own. He leaned against the railing, his breath steady, watching the rhythm of the city synchronize with his own calm. The breeze cooled his face, but he turned back toward the warmth of the room. He walked to the desk, pulled out the chair, and sat. A blank notebook lay open. He picked up his pen. The ink flowed dark and precise against the white paper as he wrote down one new idea. It was not a grand plan or a final summary of his life. It was a beginning. He set the pen down, the metal clip clicking against the wood. He rested his elbows on the desk, looking at the words he had just inscribed. The light from the desk lamp cast a long shadow, but he did not move to shift it. He sat in the silence of the room, listening to the clock tick. Every minute was a frame, every decision a choice, to build rather than to wait. He watched the ink dry, a small, dark mark on the page, the foundation for whatever came next. He exhaled slowly, his posture relaxed, his hands resting flat on the table. He did not look for a finish line. He only looked at the empty space on the page, ready to fill it once more. It was never too late to start, and he was already halfway through the first line.